Oh, oh, oh. गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुसाक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम् ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये ॐ श्रीकृष्ण परमात्मने नमः अथ श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता क्षम्यतां for being late. We were on page 465, I believe. Yeah, I just read what people had. So I'll read from here Purva Mimamsaka's argument. The Purva Mimamsaka, kindly let me know if you want me to read from previous. The Purva Mimamsaka's argument is that if the sense of agency in Atma can be negated by the Shruti that reveals the knowledge of Brahman, then that Shruti also stands negated by the Shruti that enjoins karma for a karta. Then both fail to be means of knowledge pramana, and therefore the Veda loses its pramanya. No, the Shruti that enjoins karma is negated by the Shruti that reveals Brahma Vidya. And that is why Vedanta comes later and karma comes first. It is like every erroneous perception. Will the correct perception come earlier or later? The correcting perception always comes later, after the erroneous perception. The perception that Atma is a Karta is first. Everybody has it. Later, the Shruti comes and tells us that it is not a Karta. That cannot be negated by the already negated notion that Atma is a Karta. Once it has been negated, it cannot come and negate the truth. Once the snake is negated by pointing out that it is a rope, the snake will not come and appear there again. You will not mistake that rope for a snake again. In that example, The same mistake may be committed at a different place and time, but here, place and time do not come into the picture. When does the Atma disappear? How many Atmas have you got? When can you commit the mistake? We cannot say that there is inadequate light because light is Atma. How are you going to miss that Atma? It is not time-based. It does not have a location. It is yourself. It is not dependent upon a time because time is mithya, nor does it appear in a particular state because all the states are dependent upon the Atma. Therefore, once known, when you, therefore, once known, when can you again commit a mistake about Atma? It is not possible. Once the false notion, mithya pratyaya, is understood as false, it stands negated, badhita, and the truth remains. We have seen that the sentences of the Shruti, which reveal the reality of Atma as Brahman, cannot be negated by those Shruti sentences that reveal various means for various ends, which are not otherwise known to us. There is another thing to be noted about these two different types of Shruti. While the first portion of the Shruti reveals certain ends and the means that can be employed to gain them, in the second portion, the Shruti itself is the means and the end is the very knowledge gained from the words of the Shruti. The knowledge itself is liberation, the end. Why should anybody study the Vedanta Shastra? At least in the first portion of the Veda, you understand what is desirable and what is not desirable, and how to accomplish the varieties of ends. But why should I study the last portion, which is dealing with some reality? We are not interested in reality. We are interested in achieving ends. Therefore, I study Vedanta not just to know something, but also in order to gain freedom, moksha. The value is for moksha, and here, knowledge itself is that end. What I am seeking happens to be myself, and therefore, the knowledge of myself is itself the end here. And there is no other end proposed after the knowledge. By inquiry into Vedanta or any other Shastra, what do you get? Only knowledge. Because being a Pramana, it is meant only for knowledge. The subject matter of Vedanta is the Atma, and that Atma happens to be the Satya, the truth of everything. When I understand this, I understand that I am the whole. So, this knowledge itself is an end. It is unlike any other type of knowledge. If at all there is a knowledge that we can cite as an example, it is like the knowledge of the 10th man who was searching for the 10th man. Himself being the 10th man, he did not count himself and he was told, "You are the 10th man." He discovered, "I am the 10th man." Here, knowledge is the end because he is seeking himself. When you seek something that you already have, knowledge is the end in itself. This particular end, unfolded by Vedanta, cannot be negated by the Karma Kanda because the agent, Karta, himself is negated by this knowledge. Therefore, this cannot be further negated. The I notion in the body mind sense complex gets sublated, badhyate, that is different from getting destroyed. When something is destroyed, it ceases to exist in that form. But when something is sublated, even though it continues to be there in the same form, you know that it is not true. The I notion in the body, etc., is understood as false. Unless what is false is understood as false, there is no negation, badha. When what is false is understood as false, that is knowledge, jnana. False understood as false. False understood as false is truth. The truth is, it is false. Or we can say that the erroneous conclusion or perception that I is the body, mind, sense complex is negated. How it is negated or sublated in the wake of knowledge of the Atma. How that is possible? Because one is true and the other is false. Until that knowledge takes place, the false will masquerade as the real, like any impostor. Until you call the bluff, he passes for what he pretends to be. Once you inquire into who he is, the truth is exposed. Similarly, here, until you call the bluff, this I notion in the body, etc., passes as true. Once you have that knowledge of the Atma, it cannot be negated further. I think this we already read, right? 2, 3 times we read, I think. Mhm. I forgot to write the
It's okay, Bella. You can continue from where you left today. Hmm?
464 that I, because I think I forgot the page number to be written. I forgot to, normally I write wherever I complete. And is it okay if I continue to read from where
Yeah, where you stop, because it'll have that continuity.
okay. Once a clear vision of Atma is gained, it cannot be negated by anyone at any time in any way. Who is going to negate it? If it has to be negated, there should be another Atma. Because no other Atma is available, it cannot be negated by anyone. Kenachit na badhyate. Then again, it cannot be negated at any time. Kadachit na badhyate. Because it is not dependent upon time. On the other hand, time has its being in this Atma, which is entirely free from time, Nitya. How is it going to change at any time? At no time is it possible to negate this knowledge of Atma. Further, it cannot be negated in any way. Kathanchit api na badhyate. How are you going to negate it? You require a means of knowledge, pramana for that. Inference is not going to negate it. Perception is not going to negate it because it is not an object of perception or inference. To negate it, you must have better knowledge of Atma. But the Shruti has already negated everything, even the means of knowledge, pramana, and the thing to be known, prameya, stand negated by Shruti. Which pravritti is going to negate this Atma? There is no means of knowledge to employ to gain better knowledge of the Atma so that it can be negated. Once I say Atma is pure consciousness, free from any form of limitation, not bound by time or space, and having no particular attribute, how are you going to negate it? You are aware of an attribute, and what you are aware of, you can negate. Every attribute obtains as an object of consciousness. If instead of recognizing the consciousness as Atma, you recognize any one thing that you are conscious of as the Atma, like the body or the mind or the senses, then it can be negated. Why? Because it is Anatma. It is available for your sight. Since you can objectify every one of them, they are all subject to negation. Then what is left out is that which cannot be negated further. Anything that is negatable is in your consciousness, and whatever you negate, you hold in your mind. That is what you are negating. Therefore, anything that is negated or subject to negation is within the scope of consciousness alone. But you cannot negate consciousness because the one who has to negate consciousness is that very consciousness. It is something like wanting to see your own birth or your own parents' marriage. How are you going to do that? Similarly, how are you going to negate the Atma? Everything else I can negate, but not I, the one who negates. Nor can you say, even though I have knowledge, I have not gained moksha. The knowledge is non separate from the result, moksha. And that result of this knowledge cannot be negated because it is not other than the Atma. In terms of result, it cannot be negated because there is no result that improves upon this. It is freedom. If you gain freedom from freedom, what do you have? Bondage. Therefore, neither in terms of result can it be negated because it cannot be better, nor in terms of knowledge because there is no means of knowledge for it. The Shastra has the last word when it says that you are Brahman. How are you going to improve upon it? Brahman means infinite, limitless. There is nothing other than that. Who is going to improve it? If it is anything else, it is only going to be less. When you know that fire is Ushna Prakashatya, hot and brilliant, how are you going to negate it? It cannot be negated because it is the very nature of fire. Only what is not its nature can be negated. If I give any one attribute to Atma, you can negate that. You can contend with it. But when I say that any attribute that you give to the Atma is subject to negation, how are you going to negate it? You cannot. Thus, what remains unnegatable at all times is Atma alone. You cannot negate this pure consciousness, Atma. The Shruti that reveals this cannot be negated by any other Shruti which enjoins karma. I think this was the day before yesterday's. I am repeating. Kindly forgive me, but it's very beautiful. Even though anyone wants to share anything, even though the Karma Kanda is negated by the Jnana Kanda, it has its own sphere of validity. Further, just because we say that the Shruti that teaches Brahma Vidya negates the Shruti. 494, no? Yeah. Oh my God. That's what I was wondering. This is 2, 3 days back. I will just quickly browse through the headings. Even though the Karma Kanda is negated by the Jnana Kanda, it has its own sphere of validity. So when you say that Karta is negated, Kartritva Bhavana is negated, the the Shruti 1 is not having any validity because Shruti 2 tells, the Jnana Kanda tells that you are not the Karta.
Please continue, Melody.
Okay.
And talk.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah.
I was
Okay.
also thinking that it was going very nicely. There's
The
a
flow is
Okay.
very nice. Yeah.
Okay. I will continue. Kshamyatam. I will continue what I was reading. Even though the Karma Kanda is negated by the Jnana Kanda, it has its own sphere of validity. Further, just because we say that the Shruti that teaches Brahma Vidya negates the Shruti that enjoins karma, that does not mean that the Brahma Vidya portion of the Shruti has the status of being a means of knowledge, pramana, while the Shruti enjoining karma does not. The negation is only from the standpoint of understanding that Atma is not a karta. When that is understood, and it is understood that only Atma is real and everything else, including the Shruti, is mithya, the Shruti enjoining karma no longer has any validity. But just because it is negated by the Brahma Vidya Shruti, it does not mean that it has no validity at all. It is like this. Even in the karma section, there is a certain sequence to be followed in doing karma. For example, first you have to undergo upanayana in order to be qualified for marriage, vivaha. And again, the vivaha qualifies you to do a particular ritual called the Vaishva Deva, which in turn qualifies you to perform the Agnihotra. The one who performs the Agnihotra is qualified to perform the Jyotishtoma, and the one who has performed the Jyotishtoma is qualified to perform the various Chaturmasasya rituals and so on. Each one qualifies you to perform the other, and one by one they are given up. Once you have done Upanayana, for example, you do not have to do it again. That does not mean that what was said by the Shastra about the sequence of the rituals is not valid. It is just that some of them need not be repeated. Similarly, all the various karmas that you do that are enjoined by the Shruti are supposed to make your mind ready for the knowledge given at the end in the Jnana Kanda. Then, lastly, what is the real aim of all the karma? As he is doing them, the person also gains antakarana shuddhi. And then a desire is born in the mind to know the Ishvara that he is worshipping. He begins to think, what is this Ishvara whom I am worshipping? What is the relationship between me and Ishvara? What is the truth of Ishvara? What is the truth of myself, the world? This desire to know is born because of a religious life. In Shankara's vision, the whole Karma Kanda is meant only to create an interest in the pursuit towards the self, Atma. It is in order to create that pursuit of knowledge of the self that all these karmas are mentioned. And just because one karma is negated when you do the second karma, the Shruti that talks about the first karma does not cease to be a means of knowledge. It is as valid as the Shruti that talks about the second karma. It is not valid for the one who has already done the first karma, but is valid for the one who has not yet done it. Similarly, when the Shruti talks about Atma being Brahman and therefore not a Karta, all the karma is already negated. When it says that immortality cannot be gained by karma or by progeny or by wealth, but by renouncing all these, na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena, tyagena, eke, amritatvam, anushaha, ana, anashuhu, anashuhu, क्षम्यताम् Manushah, Manashuhu. I read again it wrong. I will read correct. Na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena, tyagena, eke, amritatvam manushah. Manushuhu. It is not contradicting itself. At a particular stage, it talks about karma, and doing that karma can lead to renouncing all of it. In that sense, it makes you ready. Therefore, a religious life is enjoined for inquiry into Vedanta. Without a religious life, there is no fruitful inquiry into Vedanta because it is not simply dry philosophy. Thus, it is in a religious atmosphere alone that Vedanta is studied. Further, when the Shruti reveals that everything other than Brahman is mithya, the Karma Kanda has already become negated, badhita. How can you say that it is mithya and at the same time a means of knowledge, pramana? Even though it is mithya, still it is a means, an upaya. From the standpoint of what is to be accomplished, it has a certain empirical reality in keeping with the reality of what is to be accomplished. Suppose a person is frightened by a snake that he has seen. His friend comes along and realizes that he is mistaking a rope for a snake. What does he do? He brings in a flashlight and upaya to reveal the rope. Now the means, the upaya that he used has not produced anything, nor has it scared away the snake. It only reveals the truth. In revealing the truth, it solves a problem that was based on ignorance. If you are Brahman, free from bondage, etc., then where is moksha? Finally, the Shastra says that there is no seeker, no desirer of this knowledge, and no liberation. This is the truth. If the whole problem is false, mithya, the means for solving it is also mithya. Still, it enjoys a certain empirical reality, which is fine because it leads you to the reality. Shankara, keeping in mind that he is talking to a Purva Mimamsaka, says that it is like Arthavada, statements of fact that are auxiliary to injunctions. Shankara gives him an example that he can easily understand. Even though the Shruti is mithya, it is still valid because what it reveals is Satya. The Purva Mimamsaka's view is that the entire Veda is meant to make you act and not to reveal an existent fact. If there is any statement of fact, that statement called Arthavada has to be connected to the main injunction. Otherwise, it is meaningless. Amanayasya kriyarthatvat anarthakyam atadarthanam. Kindly forgive me, I am not able to read correctly. Amanayasya kriyarthatvat anarthakyam atadarthanam. It says, please see the footnote on page 401. But I think it is, we know what he meant. For example, in the Veda, it is said that Agni wept tears of silver. What do I gain by knowing this fact? The Veda is not literature, it is a scripture and it has to be meaningful. It is meaningful because from this statement we understand that giving silver in the ritual is prohibited. If you do, you will have reasons to cry. This statement of fact, Arthavada, becomes part of the description of how the ritual is to be done. Iti kartavyata. Similarly, Shankara says that the entire Karma Kanda can be like an Arthavada for the Jnana Kanda. Even though the means is mithya, it has some reality because of the reality of the end. It is not directly a means for jnana, but it does not lose its status of being a pramana because it is indirectly useful for the main thing. It is valid as it is useful, like secular transactions. Even in secular transactions, we use these sorts of means. If we want a child to drink milk, we tell him that his hair will grow if he drinks it. It is true that it is a false statement, but it does the job. We say a lot of things just to make the child do things which are good for him. Similarly, even though it is mithya, the Shastra talks about the Karma Kanda as though it is a pramana in order to make you do what it says so that you will gain Antakarana Shuddhi and prepare yourself for the knowledge that makes you free. We follow a mithya means to achieve a real result. To know Brahman, which is real, Satya, we have many upayas, means that are all mithya. Shankara connects the entire Karma Kanda to Brahma Vidya in this way. So the Shruti which enjoins karma, they are like all the upayas to reach to that reality. Although they are mithya by the Jnana Kanda, but still they are upaya. They are the means to reach to recognize the reality. Yeah, if anyone wants to share any. It is valid for those who have eye cognition in the body. Then he gives an alternative argument for the Karma Kanda being a direct means of knowledge, pramana, even though it is mithya. Suppose someone is not ready for moksha, then karma and its results are real for him. In that case, the karma kanda is a direct means for gaining limited ends. Once the knowledge that is generated by the Vedanta Shastra is not subject to negation, it is abadhitam jnanam, and therefore fulfills the definition of a means of knowledge, pramana, which we have defined as that which gives rise to knowledge which is not subject to negation and which is not gained by other means of knowledge. Abadhita, anadhigata, jnana, janakam, pramanam. All our other means of knowledge, like inference, anumana, etc., do not really give rise to a knowledge which is not negated. That way, eventually, even the karma kanda is not a pramana. Though it talks about means and ends, sadhana, sadhya, that we cannot otherwise know about, those means and ends are negated by knowledge of Brahman. When it is revealed that everything is one alone, non dual Atma, they all become negated Badhita. In its own sphere, in the empirical world, the Karma Kanda becomes a pramana giving rise to knowledge of means and ends. These can be used for mental purification, antakarana shuddhi, in order to gain moksha, and thereby the karma kanda becomes useful. Even though it is not directly involved in giving rise to moksha, indirectly it is useful. Secondly, it can be considered directly useful if we confine ourselves to the sphere of ignorance. If one is satisfied with simple security and pleasure, then the karma kanda is directly a pramana for gaining those limited ends. The Shruti statements that talk about various karmas are relevant for people who have not yet gained self-knowledge. While previously Shankara argued that they are indirectly valid means of knowledge for gaining moksha. Here he shows how they are directly means of knowledge prior to the gain of knowledge of Atma. It is like perception, etc., which are valid means of knowledge for one who is identified with the body, etc. Only when the body, mind, senses are identified as the Atma do these become pramanas. Otherwise, they are all sublated badhita pramanas. Even though they continue to operate, they have only empirical reality, not absolute reality. Once one knows the self. Similarly, before the knowledge of the Atma, the Karma Kanda has validity as a direct means of knowledge like perception, etc. We do not say that the Karma Kanda has no validity as a means of knowledge, pramana, only that it has no validity for the person who has gained knowledge of Atma. Even within the Karma Kanda, an injunction is only valid for the person who is qualified to do it. An injunction for a married person has no validity for a brahmachari. Similarly, for the person who is qualified for moksha or for the person who already knows the nature of Atma, the Karma Kanda has no pramanya validity. Anyone wants to share? Atma is not a karta. even by its mere presence. Because all actions take place in its presence, Atma becomes a Karta, Purva Pakshi's objection. Now, another objection is raised. The objector here accepts that Atma performs no action, that actionlessness is the nature of the Atma. He says that even though in itself it does not undergo any change in order to do an action, by its mere presence alone, the body mind sense complex performs action. That is as good as the Atma performing the action. There are different types of agency, kartritva. Either you yourself do the action or you make another person do it. Or by simple presence, you make another person act. Here he is saying that by its mere presence, Atma performs action. That is, the Atma has agency, kartritva, because without its presence, there cannot be an action by the body, mind, and senses. This type of agency is primary, mukhya. If that is the case, he will have to admit that it cannot be considered secondary, gauna. He gives some examples of this type of agency. Just because of his presence, the king is said to be engaged in the battle when his soldiers are fighting, even though he does not fight at all. Even though the king is sitting in his own chamber with a glass in his hand, the people say that the king is fighting. He does not fight at all, but because of his presence, all fighting takes place. Not only that, just because of his presence, it is said that he is defeated or victorious. He does not perform any action. But who gets defeated? The king alone gets defeated. Who has gained victory? Victory? Again, the king. It is the same for the commander in chief, the leader of the army. He also does not do anything, any fighting. He sits there in the control tower and goes on asking the infantry units to go and fight. By his orders alone, he also gets things done, while he himself does no fighting at all. But he and the king are the ones who are going to get all the praise if there is victory and who are going to be imprisoned if there is a defeat. The results of the action all come to them even though they perform no action. Even in Vedantic rituals, it is the same. The one who makes the sankalpa, I perform the karma, does not actually do the karma. The officiating priests, the Ritviks, do all the ritualistic activities. While the one who is having the ritual done, the Yajmana, sits there performing no action at all. Even though he performs no action, all the results of the ritual go to him. Similarly, even though the body, etc., does the action, while Atma itself performs no action like the Yajmana, the king, and the general, still the action is imputed to the Atma, and the results also go to Atma. Therefore, Atma has primary agency, Mukhya Kartritva, and Atma alone is subject to the result of action such as Punya and Papa, which is translated into Sukha and Dukkha. So this is Purva Pakshi's view, that Atma is the Mukhya Karta. Then he is not totally happy with the state, with the example he has given, because the king is the prompter of the action. Even though the king does not directly engage himself in action, there is some kind of activity on his part. Therefore, he gives another example. Atma is like a magnet which makes the iron feel active in its presence. The magnet sits in one place without undergoing any change and performing no action, and all the iron particles burn up. Similarly, Atma by its presence makes the mind, senses, and body all active. Therefore, though it does not undergo any change because it causes the activity, it is the primary agent, Mukhya Karta. To say that Atma performs no action and at the same time is the primary agent is a contradiction. Vedanti's refutation. Shankara says that is not true. If Atma does not perform any action and at the same time is the primary agent, which is an accessory to action, Karaka, that is a contradiction. Kartritva is of many types. Purva Pakshi's explanation. So Shankaraji refutes the Kartritva Bhavana as a primary agent. So Purva Pakshi's further explanation. Kartritva is of many types. The opponent answers that there are different types of agents, like the king who, while not doing any action, himself causes action to be done. The contradiction comes only when the action is done by the king. We both accept that Atma does not undergo any change. But that does not mean it has no agency, kartritva, he argues. Not changing does not eliminate doership on the part of the Atma because without changing, doership is also possible as we see in the king. The examples themselves are wrong, Shankara's reply. Mind well, now the Shankaraj is explaining. Shankara now points out the problem with the example. It is not true that the king performs no action. Kings do enter into battlefield, as did Rama. Similarly, the commanders in chief engage in fighting. There they are all primary agents. Even if the king does not enter into the fight, that does not mean that he does not fight. In fact, he is the one who decides to fight and then gives the orders to fight. Even the commander in chief fights by giving orders. These are all actions. They have direct doership because they give the orders. The king alone is responsible for the fight. It is not the soldiers that make the decision to fight, but the king. Then again, he is the one who distributes the salaries for all of them. The fighters are not doing a voluntary job. The king gives money to all of them to fight and provides them with all the ammunition. He is a primary agent in the battle. So too, the experience of the result of the war, victory or defeat, both belong to the king as they do to the commander-in-chief. The same is true for the Yajmana. He is the one who performs the main homa, who does the final oblation, etc. But by doing that and by making the sankalpa as well as by giving dakshina, he is definitely the primary agent, Mukhya Karta, in the ritual. Then too, the result of the ritual goes only to him. Therefore, these examples have no meaning here. The kartritva of the actionless Atma can only be figurative and never real. Shankara's reply. Therefore, if there is doership for the Atma, it is not real. It is only secondary gauna. The mention of doership is only figurative and upachara because Atma performs no action at all, unlike the king. Even when we say that Atma performs every action by its mere presence, we do not impute any kind of doership to the Atma. In fact, this argument of all actions occurring in the mere presence of Atma is only to prove that Atma performs no action. The fact that its mere presence makes everything active does not mean that it performs any action. Mention of agency is purely a figure of speech. On the other hand, it is not true that there is no direct doership for the king, implying some kind of activity. You cannot say that merely by their presence activity occurs. It is not like the magnet making the iron filings move by its mere presence. The magnet performs no action at all. It has no doership. Similarly, Atma, by its mere presence, makes the mind, sense, etc. active, but itself performs no action. Any activity that is imputed to the Atma will become figurative, upachara, or gauna. When you say, I see, I hear, I do, Atma pashyati, Atma shrunoti, Atma karoti, and Atma karoti, it is purely a figure of speech, not real. Lastly, Shankara accepts this. So that Mithya Pratyaya is Gauna. That is what Shankara accepts. Yeah, kindly share if we want to just quickly revise how Purva Pakshis kept on arguing that Atma is a Mukhya Karta because in its presence only everything takes place. But Shankaraji, he gives the example Purva Pakshi about the king and the magnet. But in fact, in the battlefield, the king do fight. The king does fight. And even it is.
Can you repeat this paragraph one more time, Vela?
Yeah.
This is therefore there is doership for the Atma.
Yeah. The kartritva of the actionless Atma can only be figurative and never real, Shankara's reply. Therefore, if there is doership for the Atma, it is not real, it is only secondary gauna. The mention of doership is only figurative and upchara because Atma performs no action at all, unlike the king. Even when we say that Atma performs every action by its mere presence, we do not impute any kind of doership to the Atma. In fact, this argument of all actions occurring in the mere presence of Atma is only to prove that Atma performs no action. The fact that its mere presence makes everything active does not mean that it performs any action. Mention of agency is purely a figure of speech. On the other hand, it is not true that there is no direct doership for the king, implying some kind of activity. You cannot say that merely by their presence activity occurs. It is not like the magnet making the iron filings move by its mere presence. The magnet performs no action at all. It has no doership. Similarly, Atma, by its mere presence, makes the mind, senses, etc. active, but itself performs no action. Any activity that is imputed to the Atma will become figurative, upachara, or gauna. When you say, I see, I hear, I do, Atma pashyati, Atma shrunoti, Atma karoti. It is purely a figure of speech, not real. Lastly, Shankara accepts this.
So this is as long as you are attributing doership to Atma, then it becomes like a figure of speech, like Gauna. So as long as there is Katritva that you are attributing to Atma, it is not real. That is what Shankara says. So he is not refuting that that Mithya Pratyaya, Gauna Pratyaya that we had discussed, that was discussed a few days ago. He's saying as long as you you give doership, you attribute doership and a sense of agency to the Atma, like for instance, when the Jnani, for the Jnani, he does not have doership. He understands that the Atma is the non-doer. For him, the whatever the Atma does becomes like a figure of speech, Gauna Pratyaya. Atma Shrunoti, Atma. So that is what Shankara is saying here. So by the mere presence of Atma, all this activity is happening. That is the Gauna Pratyaya. But the fact that Atma is a doer is not real. He is holding on to his concept of the fact that it is Mithya Pratyaya only. But when you talk of in the presence of Atma, all this is happening, that becomes the Gauna Pratyaya. I mean, I'm not sure whether I've got the intended meaning across. When the statement, lastly, Shankara accepts this, it does not mean he is accepting the original statement of the Pura Pakshi saying it is, Atma is Karta, it's Gauna Pratyaya, it is not Mithya Pratyaya. It's not like that. Because in the presence of Atma, body, mind, sense complex is functioning. He's not still doing. He's very clear that the Atma is akarta. Atma is actionless. That is very clear. That clarity is there. He's only saying when you say in the presence of Atma, all this is happening. Because Purapakshi gave the example of the king. In the presence of the king, the war is waged. But the results of the war, the king experiences. So according to Purva Pakshi, he's saying the Papa Punya, whatever is done, Atma is enjoying, like the king enjoys. either the success or defeat of the war. But here Shankar, when you say in the presence of Atma all this is happening, it means that it is like a figure of speech. Atma shrunoti, Atma karoti. Atma is the substratum on which all this is happening. All this is still mithya pratyaya, but the fact that Atma shrunoti, that is a figure of speech. Atma does not do anything.
Brahmaraji, here the use of upachara is same as secondary or gauna, because upachara word is little misleading. Upachara or upachara?
Upachara. Upachara
Because
is like gauna. Yeah.
Usually we use it as a treatment.
Yeah, I think, see, each word in Sanskrit has multiple meanings. So here we have to look at it in the context.
Yeah, so here
in
it
this
must be the secondary.
Yeah, secondary.
Okay.
Like similar to gauna.
And upaya for the Shruti in Karma Kanda, it is upaya. They are the means.
Yeah, those are all those rituals that they've been giving, right?
Yeah,
that is
the Karma Kanda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall I read further? Dr. Mara, would you like to read? I did not see. Please let me know if you would like to read, huh?
Yeah, I'll try. You want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. From where do you want me to read? Shankara's reply?
Yeah, wherever you are comfortable. I mean, here we completed till here. Lastly, Shankara accepts this.
Accept this, okay.
Yeah.
If Atma is not a karta, it is not a bhokta also. So, if Atma is not a karta, it's not a bhokta also. That being so, when the doership is only figure of speech, I think
It's okay, Dr. Mara. It's okay. If Atma is not a karta, it is not a bhokta also. That being so, when the doership is only a figure of speech, then the result is for whom? The result is also a figure of speech. The connection to the results of karma, the punya and papa that manifest as sukha and dukkha can only be figurative gauna, not real mukhya. Since Atma itself performs no action, it is not accountable for the karma and is not going to be the recipient of the result of the karma. A figurative doer is not going to perform a real karma. Therefore, it is not true that the changeless self is an agent and an enjoyer through the activities of the body, mind, and senses. To say that Atma is changeless and at the same time is a doer and an enjoyer is a contradiction. Because samsara is due to delusion born of ignorance, total removal of samsara is possible through jnana alone. I repeat once again the heading. Because samsara is due to delusion born of ignorance, Total removal of samsara is possible through jnana alone. When the cause is delusion, everything is possible. All the questions have been answered. Now, at the end, Shankara says that when the cause is delusion, Bhranti, everything is possible. The Atma, even though not a Karta, becomes a Karta. When the body, mind, sense complex is mistaken for the Atma due to ignorance, there is an erroneous notion that Atma is the Karta. It is all possible, just like in a dream or in a magic show. What is not there appears to be there. It seems as though there are many, though there are not many at all. There is only you. So beautiful sentence. I repeat once again. It is all possible, just like in a dream or in a magic show. What is not there appears to be there. It seems like as though there are many, though there are not many at all. There is only you. It seems as though you are a karta, though you are not doing anything at all. Similarly, here, Atma, without being the karta, appears to be a karta. Without being an enjoyer, bhokta appears to be a bhokta. And in spite of the Atma being non-dual, the duality of seer seen is apparent. Everything is possible. Without creation, there is creation. Without sustenance, there is sustenance. Without dissolution, there is dissolution. भ्रान्ति निमित्तं तु सर्वम् उपपद्यते यथा स्वप्ने मायायां च एव न च देहाध्यात्मप्रत्यय भ्रान्ति सन्तानविच्छेदेषु सुषुप्ति समाध्यादिषु कर्तृत्व भोक्तृत्वादि अनर्थ उपलभ्यते तस्मात् भ्रान्ति प्रत्यय निमित्त एव अयं संसार भ्रमो न तु परमार्थ इति. There is no samsara in situation where there is no delusion. So this whole samsara, the whole creation is due to that delusion. And due to that erroneous notion, we believe that Atma is a karta and the bhokta, and we see the duality. Yeah, kindly mute if by mistake you are unmuted. There is no samsara in situations where there is no delusion. And again, in situations like deep sleep or samadhi, where there is no continuity of the false I notion in the body mind sense complex, there is no sense of doership or enjoyership. I repeat, there is no samsara in situations where there is no delusion. And again, in situations like deep sleep or samadhi, where there is no continuity of the false I notion in the body mind sense complex, there is no sense of doership or enjoyership. Therefore, this samsara in the form of kartritva and bhoktritva is entirely due to bhranti pratyaya, delusion alone, and therefore it is not real. Once there is a fundamental mistake and that is taken into account, afterwards everything is logical. Once you look upon the Atma as the mind, body, sense complex, everything is possible. Then karma becomes important. There is dharma, adharma, punya, papa, karma yoga, antakaran shuddhi, and sannyasa. Everything becomes meaningful. It is this delusion, this mistaken notion of the self as the body, mind, etc., that is responsible for all that is undesirable, what we call samsara. It begins with the mistaken identification of I as the mind. Then there is identification through the subtle body with the whole physical body. Now there is the duality of Jnata, the knower, Jnana, the means of knowledge, Gneya, object of knowledge, and the duality of Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. This is samsara. I think the whole essence in this one paragraph. All discussion so far is summed up so well. And there is the total resolution of samsara, implying the resolution of the duality of the individual, the world, and God, Jiva, Jagata, Ishvara, in the wake of knowledge. That total resolution is moksha. Thus, it is established that moksha is by knowledge. Giving up all karmas is purely by knowledge. If you take to this Atma, giving up all karmas, sarva dharman parityajya, I will release you from all papa and punya. Who is this I? It is Atma, the innermost self, the self of all, the Paramatma. Recognition of this Atma, the real nature of the Lord, and the individual Jiva is the release. In this chapter, the entire Gita Shastra is being summed up. And in the previous two verses, it was again briefly summed up. In one verse, Karma Yoga was mentioned, and in the other, Jnana Karma Sannyasa, renunciation of all actions by knowledge. Sarva Dharman Parityajya. So beautifully, Bhagavan is so compassionate. He has explained it so well. And Shankaraji, in the form of Lord only, has explained us so well in detail how Mithya Pratyaya is creating all the samsara, the whole samsara. Should we discuss and stop for Manana here, or I read further? Because it is the next verse. I think this was the 66th verse and now the 67th.
Yeah, can you just read the last paragraph again, Bela?
Yeah. I would just love to chant the verse 66. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchah. Abandoning all dharmas of the body, mind, and intellect, take refuge in me alone. I will liberate thee from all sins. Grieve not. There is no samsara in situations where there is no delusion. And again, in situations like deep sleep or samadhi, where there is no continuity of the false I notion in the body mind sense complex, there is no sense of doership or enjoyership. Therefore, this samsara in the form of kartritva and Bhoktritva is entirely due to Bhranti Pratyaya, delusion alone, and therefore it is not real. Once there is a fundamental mistake and that is taken into account, afterwards everything is logical. Once you look upon the Atma as the body mind sense complex, everything is possible. Then karma becomes important. There is dharma and adharma, punya, papa, karma, yoga, antakarana shuddhi, and sannyasa. Everything becomes meaningful. It is this delusion, this mistaken notion of the self as the body, mind, etc., that is responsible for all that is undesirable, what we call samsara. It begins with the mistaken identification of I as the mind. Then there is identification through the subtle body with the whole physical body. Now there is the duality of Jnata, the knower, Jnana, the means of knowledge, Gneya, object of knowledge, and the duality of Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara. This is samsara. And there is the total resolution of samsara, implying the resolution of the duality of the individual, the world, and God. Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara in the wake of knowledge. That total resolution is moksha. Thus, it is established that moksha is by knowledge. Giving up all karmas is purely by knowledge. If you take to this samsara, giving up all karmas, sarva dharman parityajya, I will release you from all papa and punya. Who is this I? It is Atma, the innermost self, the self of all, the Paramatma. Recognition of this Atma, the real nature of the Lord and the individual Jiva, is the release. In this chapter, the entire Gita Shastra is being summed up. And in the previous two verses, it was again briefly summed up. In one verse, Karma Yoga was mentioned, and in the other, Jnana Karma Sannyasa, renunciation of all actions by knowledge, Sarva Dharman Parityajya. Very beautiful. I think we should do Manana. Yeah, kindly share your understanding, please.
So, with the illogical error that the Atma is the Karta and the Bhokta, a lot of logic comes into place. Once you, with this mistaken notion that Atma is the doer, then everything else comes. All the empirical world becomes logical. But the fundamental error is illogical, which is that the Atma is the doer. But in the empirical world, there is everything that is there is logical in the sense dharma, karma, karma yoga, all the purusharthas, all that, and also the whole of the karma kanda becomes meaningful, becomes logical, and one has to go through the steps of the karma kanda before maturing enough, before being eligible for the moksha purushartha. Therefore, the having a religious life is quite a necessity. the difference is between an ethical person and a religious person. Sometime back we had this question whether a person who's doing only good things, he's not harming anyone, but he's not doing any rituals, he's not into prayer, he's an atheist, but a very ethical person, will he be able to get moksha? The question is no, because unless he recognizes Ishvara as uh, as the unless he has the concept of Ishvara, unless he has the concept of the divine, he would not become religious. Just by being ethical, you gain nowhere. It's like you're just walking on the treadmill. You're just walking all the time, but you're not going to any goal, reaching your destination. Whereas a person who's religious, he starts with doing the step-by-step things, starting with Upanayana, then the Agnihotra, then it's all a very sequential thing that is laid out in the Karma Kanda. So at some point, there will be a turning point where he will start questioning, who is this Ishvara that I'm praying to? That will be his turning point. And that will come in everybody's, I think it comes in due course, like it happened to all of us. And then you go from the Karma Kanda, you slowly graduate to going into the Jnana Kanda. So therefore, Shankara does not negate the Shastra as a pramana for Karma Kanda. He says there it has its role to play. But once you know Atma is Akarta, then it loses its pramana. Then there's no point in saying Atma is Karta there. Because Atma has no location. Atma is all that is there. So where is the question of any action that will happen?
So here beautifully Shankaracharya ji has established that Tat Tvam Asi, here Jiva Ishvara Aikya is so beautifully established. So once that Nishchayatmika Buddhi comes, that I am that, Aham Brahma Asmi, and Tat Tvam Asi. So here there is a confirmation that I am complete, I am full. So here there should not be misunderstanding for the word sarva dharman parityajya. It doesn't mean that you have to leave all your practices or all your actions. With knowledge, we have to accept that and we have to be that.
We do meditation, we have the three conditions, no? I am not doing anything. See, when you are in meditation, you are with Atma only. I am not doing anything. You see? I don't want anything. Means I am Purna. And I do nothing. That is Akarta. Guruji gave so simple three formula when we do the meditation. You know? That's it. Very, very nice it is. It amounts to same thing. No? I am nothing means I am Atma, I do anything, I am not that, I am not the body, mind, everything. I am nothing, I do nothing, akarta, and I do not want anything. That is I am Purna. Jai Guru.
Yeah, very beautiful, very true. We are all fortunate that we got this precious gift, all of us.
Now,
Anyone
Guruji
wants
gives
to
very
share?
simple.
Yes.
He doesn't confuses us. Just do simple things. Very, very three things. When you sit for meditation, you are Atma. But that has to establish in our consciousness always. That is enlightenment. Not only while doing meditation, but start with that. Slowly, 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 it increases. Means the time period. We may do it for 20 minutes or 40 minutes meditation, but that has to continue. Always you are established. You need not have to sit, but it is established. That is enlightenment. Moksha. Very good.
Shall we stop here today?
Yes, Brahmaraji.
Let's just make note of the page that you stopped.
And I will again, because I could not open the YouTube. I will try once again. Normally I open and enter the Zoom. If anybody can share, just
Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.
just give me a few minutes, because I have to log in and then open the page.
निरुपमनित्यनिरंशकेऽप्यखण्डे मयि चिति सर्वविकल्पनादिशून्ये घटयति जगदीश जीवभेदम् त्वघटितघटना पटीयसी माया त्वघटितघटना पटीयसी माया श्रुतिशतनिगमान्तशोधकानपि अहधनादिनिदर्शनेन सद्यः कलुषयति चतुष्पदाद्यभिन्ना न घटितघटना पडीयसी माया सुखचिदखण्डविबोधमद्वितीयम् वियदनलादिविनिर्मित्ते नियोज्य भ्रमयति भवसागरे नितान्तम् त्वघटितघटना पटीयसी माया अपगतगुणवर्णजातिभेदे सुखचितिविप्रविडाद्यहं कृतिं च स्फुटयति सुतदारकेहमोहम् त्वघटितघटना पटीयसी माया विधिहरिहरविभेदमप्यखण्डे बत विरचय्य बुधानपि प्रकामम् भ्रमयति हरिहरविभेदभावान् घटितघटना पटीयसी माया त्वघटितघटना पटीयसी